The Madman! Welcome to my Descent of Dragons review for Shaman, Warlock, and Warrior. So starting with Shaman. Shaman also has a Galakrond, and I think that this is the best Galakrond out of all the Galakrons. What makes, I believe, the Shaman Galakrond so good is that all of these cards are independently good, but also most of these cards have battle cries, which are really good with Quest Shaman. So Invocation of Frost is a Glacial Shard with Rush. That's awfully good. But surprisingly, I actually am not sure if that will make it into the Galakrond deck, because I think that the best Galakrond Shaman deck is going to involve Quest Shaman, and this card does not say Battle Cry on it. So maybe you don't need Invocation of Frost, even though I think the Galakrond deck is tier 1. I'm gonna rate Invocation of Frost 4 stars. Not sure it's gonna make it in there. Corrupt Elementalist will definitely make it into that deck, being the primary invoker. Because again, if you just play one Corrupt Elementalist, you just default invoke Galakrond twice, but if you play it with a quest, you're invoking 4 times. 5 stars. Dragons pack, huge reason why this Galakrond is good. 5 mana, summon 2 5/6s with Taunt. Quest Shaman had a potential weakness to aggro decks, but what if you summoned 12 health worth of Taunt for 5 mana? Dragons pack, 5 stars. And finally, Galakrond the Tempest. I think it has one of the best battle cries out there, but what makes it probably especially good is that you use the hero power of the quest one final time before landing the Galakrond, and there are 4 8/8s to deal with, all in the same turn. That's very difficult for a lot of decks to deal with. I think it's an excellent finisher for the Quest Shaman, and I think the other stuff that is provided is really going to help Quest Shaman out. Galakrond the Tempest, 5 stars. Shaman also gets a lot of love in another package. Overload Aggression package with Storm's Wrath, Surging Tempest, and Cumulo Maximus. Now the Overload lovers don't really want to be overloaded by that much, so you may not need that much overload, which is why I didn't include the Dragon Squall Hunter in, but we can keep it off to the side. It's coming up next. So I don't think that overload is a benefit. The deck has enough overload already. The Overload Shaman naturally creates a bunch of tokens. This card could potentially replace Bloodlust. It's much cheaper than Bloodlust. It gives you a permanent buff. You can play it early, you can play it late. It's not as win more as Bloodlust is. So yeah, perhaps you just run Storm's Wrath. Surging Tempest is an excellent start to those aggressive decks. It's a 1 mana 1/3. Nice. And it has the strong potential to be a 1 mana 2/3. 5 stars, Storm's Wrath. 5 stars, Surging Tempest. The real cherry on top of this aggressive Shaman deck, which was already arguably tier 1, is Cumulo Maximus. 5 mana, 5/5, deal 5. That's very, very good. All you have to do is you have to be overloaded. And there are a lot of ways to overload in that deck. Cumulo Maximus might be so strong that instead of going the Galakrond route for Shaman, maybe you go the non-Galakrond route and you just double Cumulo Maximus's Battle Cry to deal 10 damage. 5 stars, Cumulo Maximus. And then the final stuff for Shaman is going to be the Dragon stuff and the Control stuff. Squall Hunter is reminiscent of Flame Reef Faceless. Arguably better, because 1, it's a dragon, 2, it has spell damage. But I'm not entirely sure that it sees play, and it might not be strong enough in that Overload Shaman deck because it doesn't run that many spells. It is a dragon though, which is good with the dragon synergy with one of what looked to be one of the best cards in the game, Lightning Breath. For 3 mana, you Flame Strike a board of 3 minions. You deal 4 damage to 3 adjacent minions. Wow. But the problem is, I just don't see that Control Shaman as outvaluing, outlasting other control decks. Ultimately, I think that this kind of dragon control deck is tier 3. So as good as Lightning Breath is, it outstandingly only gets 3 stars. And as good as Squall Hunter looks, I think I'm only going to give it 3 stars as well. I think that's a tier 3 deck. Bandersmosh is a pretty sweet card for control decks, with the chance to high roll amazingly. I think it is a great card. I think it's so good that I might want to try to fit it into Quest Shaman, but it's very hard to fit the card in because there's not enough space. Remains to be seen how good it is, but I do believe that you can wait for a really good Bandersmosh. 3 stars. And then finally, you have Nithog, who is a dragon. Gets you a lot of value potentially, but the problem is control decks don't really have that strong a control on the board at all times. You often have to let a few small minions go, and those small minions can kill your eggs. And then Nithog isn't very good if your 2 eggs are killed. And so for that reason, I have to give Nithog a 1-star. Seems best in a mid-range type deck. I don't think that mid-range Shaman, which isn't Quest Galakrond Shaman, will be that good. So in summary, I think that Shaman gets a great new way to still be in the lead with Quest Shaman. Add the Galakrond package to Quest Shaman. It'll be a bit of refining on whether or not Invocation of Frost makes the cut, and whether or not maybe you run the 4-mana 2/2 Rush Invoke card just to try to get turn 5 Dragons pack to follow up. Yeah, a lot of interesting things. I think ultimately just the sheer power of these Battle Cry cards are going to do well with the Quest Shaman. Dragon Shaman does get an amazing Lightning Breath, but ultimately I think Control Shaman takes second fiddle to the better Shaman, Galakrond Quest Shaman. And then of course there's the complete different direction you can take Shaman, which is aggressive. You're gonna smack people with your Surging Tempest, you're gonna fill the board, you're gonna Storm's Wrath them, you're gonna finish them off with Cumulo Maximus. It's gonna hurt. Warlock wasn't in a great spot last set, and I think this set provides cool stuff for Warlock, but not necessarily stuff to give it a tier 1 deck. So there's 2 primary directions Warlock's heading towards. First, the Galakrond stuff. You've got Dragonblight Cultist, which is a good zoo card. When you're invoking Galakrond, you summon 2 1/1s, which works well with the Flood Zoo strategy. You have Fiendish Rites, which gives your minions +1 attack, which includes the cards you just invoked from Galakrond, so at the very least summon 2 2/1s. And you have a great Galakrond Lover, the Veiled Worshipper, drawing you a bunch of cards. Galakrond, I think this battle cry is not as good as some of the others, and the hero power isn't that great either. I think that the Zoo archetype, which is currently tier 3, will embrace Galakrond and will bring in all 4 and a few of the neutral cards into their deck. You'll definitely use the Grim Rally and the Sacrifice package with it. You'll put the wants lots of minions in play package, the Knife Juggler, the Sea Giant, maybe even Jumbo Imp. Potential problem with this deck though is that perhaps other aggro decks, other board control, other tempo decks are better, and maybe Zoo just gets tempoed out. Dragonblight Cultist and Fiendish Rites aren't great if the Zoo's minions are cleared from the board. And thus I have to call this Zoo deck still tier 3, 3 stars. On the other hand, every single other card goes into a Control Warlock / Handlock deck. Rain of Fire I'll mention first. I don't think it's impactful enough, so 1 star. The other cards though, they're all pretty sweet. When you looked at Nether Breath, you were like, wow, that's insane. It's 2 mana, deal 4, heal 4. Dark Skies looks not great, but when you think about it, it's basically 3 mana Volcano. That's also insane. Crazed Netherwing is insane. It's Hellfire +1 mana for 10 more stats. Insane. Abyssal Summoner maybe doesn't make it into that deck because you have to have a hand size of 7, including the Abyssal Summoner, before it's like just a summon a 2/2 and a 6/6, which isn't necessarily what you want in a control deck. So I'll say Abyssal Summoner is the weakest of all of these. 2 stars Abyssal Summoner. Valdris, that's a sprint which has a 4/4 and increases your max hand size, giving you more options. Zeraku, just lots of stats. Ultimately though, Control Warlock was nowhere on the radar last expansion. And this expansion, yes, you have a bunch of good stuff, but this reminds me of when Knights of the Frozen Throne came out, and Defile came out, and Defile, yeah, really good card, but didn't have an archetype to support. Control Warlock ended up being tier 3. This stuff all seems pretty good, but when you're trying to match it up against other control decks, it's just not that powerful. I'm going to have to give the Control Warlock archetype tier 3 status, 3 stars. I think you put a dragon package into it, run it with Crazed Netherwing, try to get a bunch of card advantage, and then try to beat them with dragons as your endgame. But that's not really that secure of a win. In summary, Warlock gets 2 new archetypes. Galakrond Warlock is going to be Zoo, I think it's going to make it tier 3. And the other archetype that it creates is Handlock, Control Warlock, Dragon Warlock, basically all of those in one. This reminds me a bit of when Knights of the Frozen Throne came out and Warlock got a bunch of good cards, including Defile, and I famously rated Defile 1 star, saying that a Control Warlock deck isn't good, and it ended up being like almost tier 3. In a similar way, I think that there are really good Warlock cards here, but I feel like that isn't enough to push the Control Warlock archetype, along with all the other cards even. So I think that's going to be a nice tier 3 deck, and we're going to wait for another Kobolds and Catacombs to push Control Warlock into an insane deck. And finally, we have Warrior. I think Warrior has the second best Galakrond, in that this will create an archetype. Well, not necessarily create, but just change an archetype. They are cards that you might want to play individually anyways, but the fact that they all synergize with each other is really good. I think this goes into the currently existing Aggro Warrior. When you invoke Galakrond, you get +3 attack, so the Ritual Chopper comes out and deals 4 damage. The Awaken is kind of like a swipe where you have to take face damage, but that's okay because you're a tempo aggressive deck, your health doesn't matter. Scion of Ruin is an insane 9/6 for 3 mana with Rush if you invoke twice, which you'll of course try to do, and Galakrond is kind of the replacement for Arcanite Reaper. You draw a bunch of minions, you give them +4/+4. If you manage to invoke Galakrond 4 times, you get a free Arcanite Reaper alongside all the draw 4 fuelage at the end, and giving, +16/+16 total stats. I think as an aggressive deck, you probably won't get to the final form of Galakrond too often with this deck. Probably on average, you get to the middle one, where it's just draw 2 minions, give it +4/+4. Sure. So you toss out the 11 cards from Aggro Warrior that were weakest, and then you put in these 11 cards of the Galakrond package. These 4 cards, plus the other 2 neutral invokes, plus, of course, Kronks. So I think this is a tier 1 deck. There's another aggressive deck here. It's the Pirate package. Is Pirate Warrior going to come back and scare everyone with the Sky Raiders efficiency, with the Sky Barge's Flame Waker type health, even more than that, as well as the ship's cannon ability, and Ankar, which is an insane 3 mana 2/3 weapon that basically draws you 3 cards. The problem here? Pirates aren't that strong. It's really reliant on you drawing Ankar. The other cards in this deck aren't very good. I'm going to have to say that the Pirate Warrior deck, not much to fear here, highly varianced based on whether or not you draw Ankar. I'm going to say it's a tier 3 deck, 3 stars. When you look at all the other aggressive decks out here in the meta, I think those aggressive decks are stronger than this Pirate Warrior deck. And then you've got the rest of the stuff here, which generally fit a control theme. So along the same lines as this tempo aggro Galakrond Warrior, I think there might exist a Highlander Warrior deck which will run Evil Quartermaster. Evil Quartermaster is just a very solid card that you would consider in a tempo deck, you would consider in a control deck, but is usually not in the top 30. It's close, but it's not quite there. Highlander Warrior, though, will use Evil Quartermaster. I'll give Evil Quartermaster 4 stars. Tier 2 deck, and there's also a chance that Evil Quartermaster sees play in a different deck. Perhaps a control deck. Ramming Speed is Super Collider except 1 use. 1 star, just run Super Collider, I think. Molten Breath pushes you towards a Dragon Warrior, but I think that the current Mech Warrior is better. Molten Breath, I'm going to give 2 stars. You'll see some experimentation, but I think Mech Warrior is going to be better and will still be a good deck. And finally, Deathwing Mad Aspect, 2 stars as well. I mean, dragons are cool, but I just don't see dragons as being good in Warrior, despite, yes, they have Voon. Other classes do the dragons better, what can I say? In summary, I think Warriors get a lot of cool toys. There's a new archetype, Pirate Warrior. It's back. I don't think it's quite as good as it used to be, but can high roll, as it did in the Dev Showcase stream. It's got the Galakrond archetype, which is, of course, set to be an aggressive deck. I think Aggro Warrior takes the Galakrond stuff and fits it in, and that's going to be good Warrior stuff.